Hey everyone, CW Music Reviews here. I'm CDD, and this is going to be a music review of the new Red Hot Chili Peppers album, The Getaway. Red Hot Chili Peppers, if for some reason you're not in the know, are a California band that have been around since the early 80s, and this is their latest full-length album. Ever since I stumbled upon a copy of Californication in my dad's CD collection, I've been a big fan of these guys. I pretty much love the band's entire catalog with the exception of their debut self-titled album. That album is garbage, don't listen to it. These guys have pretty much gone through many a lineup change since the band's inception. From like having half of their members depart the group, then the guitarist came back for Freaky Style, and the drummer came back for Uplift Mofo Party Plan, and pretty much dropping the only album that had all 4 original members. Their guitarist Hillel then died of a heroin overdose, and Jack Irons, their drummer, pretty much left the band and out of like major depression because of what happened. Then the classic lineup assembled with the album Mother's Milk. Anthony Kiedis, Flea, Chad Smith, and John Frusciante. These guys will be responsible for some of the best Red Hot Chili Peppers albums Red Hot Chili Peppers would ever put out. Blood Sugar Sex Magic, Mother's Milk, Californication, to an extent, By the Way, although that was a very Frusciante-centric album, as well as their last as this classic lineup, Stadium Arcadium. An album that recently got reissued on vinyl and for some reason I have not bought, and I need to fix that because I'm stupid. Frusciante then left the band when the band went on hiatus around the late 2000s, and they decided to recruit this new guy named Josh Klinghoffer, who pretty much did backup guitar for the band when they were on tour, and he was a very close collaborator with John Frusciante. He pretty much has the same level of understanding of music theory and pretty much a similar amount of talent. So it's kind of like they got another John Frusciante, but at the same time, he's no one like John Frusciante at all. And when they dropped I'm With You, my big thing with the album was that Josh needed to start embracing his identity as a Chili Pepper, because while there was no bad guitar riffs or chords on that entire album, I still think he had a lot of work to do in terms of just getting comfortable in this band he's now found himself in. And I was thinking that this would be the case, and this would lead to, once again, another fantastic Chili Peppers album, but a lot of different changes that no one really could have foreseen happened. For one, Flea had a snowboarding accident that almost ended his career. It almost like rendered him unable to play bass, and he pretty much had to relearn it. Add to that, Rick Rubin is not producing this album, and this will make the first album Rick Rubin has not produced for the band since Mother's Milk. Instead, we got Danger Mouse. And that seems to be a name that's both notorious and praised. He's definitely left his mark as a producer, pretty much doing this mashup album of Jay-Z's The Black Album and the Beatles' The White Album making the Grey Album. And he's definitely been responsible for the rise in popularity for the Black Keys, even if people adamantly despise Danger Mouse for producing Black Keys material. Though, to be fair, one, that material isn't bad, and two, Turn Blue was primarily Pat and Dan's doings. Danger Mouse also has produced probably one of the most underrated Beck albums, Modern Guilt, so I saw no reason to think that maybe Danger Mouse would definitely breathe some new ideas and new life into the band, especially since Danger Mouse, from what I understand, adamantly wanted them to conceive of new songs in the studio even after the band already wrote about 20 or 30 of them prior to that. But enough of the background information. What do I, as a hardcore RHCP fan, think of this album? I certainly like it a lot. However, it's not really going to go down as a favorite of mine in RHCP's discography. This album's about 13 tracks in length, about a little over 50 minutes long. So it's a standard length in terms of tracks and album length for the band. What I pretty much wanted from RHCP at this point in their career is to just keep doing what they've always been doing. Still innovating and finding creative ways to really tweak their signature sound. I think they have with Danger Mouse on production, and surprisingly enough, Nigel Godrich, producer of Radiohead, on mixing with this album as well. Here's something different. A producer that's actually actively engaged in the performances and the songwriting. Not all of them, but certainly a good chunk of them. Danger Mouse is contributing quite a bit of synth here, namely the Getaway, as well as Go Robot and a few other tracks here. It definitely adds kind of a psychedelic flair to it. I think Danger Mouse is definitely adding his own unique sound to an already unique band, and it's a pretty cohesive mix. Flea's bass, for the most part, is treated with the same equality as Klinghoffer's guitar here. Chad Smith's drums, they definitely do their thing. At some points, like We Turn Red and this Ticonderoga, it's definitely like taken to like more booming and at times kind of abrasive lengths. It's an interesting experiment, but I think with this Ticonderoga, it doesn't really like translate that particularly well, particularly the loud moments. There's soft moments on this track which adds quite a bit of variety to the track, but that doesn't mean like it makes the really loud and kind of jarring moment that comes up on the chorus as well as the verses make that really palatable. But for the most part, the production and the mixing here is particularly good. Not as much sound compression as when Rick Rubin was producing, which is a nice change of pace. If the band isn't constantly finding new ways to keep innovating themselves, then I see no point in being a fan of their music. And they're definitely doing that. The track, The Getaway, the opening track here, it's definitely a nice and easygoing intro. There's like some guitar chords that kind of remind me of like a Battles album in a way. There seems to be some kind of nice fusion of like electronic and looped beats along with Chad Smith's own drumming, and it just guides particularly well. The track Go Robot, I wasn't sure I was going to be like that fond of on first couple listens, seeing as I'm familiar with the bass line as well as the vocal melody to She's Only 18 off of Stadium Arcadium. But regardless, it ended up growing on me quite a bit and I certainly enjoy it. Plus I think the lyrics about how this woman is more like a robot than a human is pretty funny. There's a few ballads here like The Longest Wave, which I think is lyrically kind of clever, the way it talks about all the thoughts coming in, then this wave just like finally just comes up the shore and eventually goes back into the ocean and just builds up more thought and some really clever metaphor there. Encore's a pretty cool ballad as well. I think my favorite ballad though is The Hunter, which seems to be like very personal. I definitely like personal lyricism from Anthony, with Klinghoffer on bass, weirdly enough. The piano line sounds really nice, it sounds very pleasant, and there's some nice trumpet that pops up that is a good addition to the track. The lead single off this track, Dark Necessities, is a pretty peculiar track. It kind of starts off as like kind of low-key before Flea's signature bass that appears on a good chunk of the tracks, like Go Robot, comes in and really drives the track. Klinghoffer's guitar is particularly different as well. It definitely has kind of a funk vibe mixed in with like a dark and really jittery type thing going on. I especially like Klinghoffer's guitar solo on this track. That's the thing I do enjoy a lot about this album. Klinghoffer is definitely much more comfortable with this band. Definitely shows on a good chunk of the solos, like on Dark Necessities, like on Goodbye Angels, like on Dreams of a Samurai and Detroit, even though I really don't like Detroit. That track is, while not a bad track instrumentally, it has kind of like a nice and mid-paced garage rock vibe, but the lyrics on this track are just so half-assed. If you're familiar with the Blood Sugar Sex Magik, there was a song called The Greeting Song. Rick Rubin, like, pretty much kind of sort of forced Anthony to write about cars and women. I wouldn't be surprised if Danger Mouse, like, forced him to write a song about Detroit, and it just doesn't sound all that cool. This cringeworthy line about how Henry Ford, like, couldn't make it into life or something of that nature, but he was able to make it through on a Ford. Nice shout out to the Stooges and Jay Dilla though, but still the lyrics are not vibing with me all that well. Now in terms of lyricism, I'm definitely intrigued with what Kiedis is saying. He's not Shakespeare. I don't think he's ever been Shakespeare, but he's just abstract and poetic enough to the point where you can definitely have quite a bit of thought as to what it is he's saying. In a sense, you'd actually have to get context into his life to get maybe a better idea of, like, little intricate details into what he's talking about. Up until the point I learned that a good chunk of these songs are actually about a 2-year relationship he had that ended in, like, some kind of nuclear fashion. I never would have figured that listening to the tracks. Maybe this is why it's called The Getaway. It's about, I guess, not just getting away from, like, the traditional mindset that they have been writing their songs, but also, I guess, emotionally getting away from, like, all of this stuff that he and everyone else is going through right now. In a sense, that kind of reminds me of Californication, the way how they pretty much had to retreat from, like, the turmoil of the 90s that a lot of bands and musicians have been going through. It's probably not as drastic here, but regardless, I definitely like the sentiment of this album title. The track We Turn Red, where lyrically he seems to be, like, all over the nation in a sense. He's in Chicago, he was going fishing in New Orleans. There's actually a really cool line that seems to be pro-immigration about how Mexico is his neighbor. He's talking about how taking in their sick and tired racists that we've admired over the years, and it's a really clever little snippet. It pretty much popped out to me even more so now, seeing as we have a presidential frontrunner that could potentially start kicking illegal immigrants out and building a wall around Mexico to keep them out. The track Goodbye Angels is proof why Kiedis is at his best when he's writing about death. He seems to note some kind of woman that committed suicide a month before he ever met her. It's definitely an incredibly emotional and really heart-wrenching track in a way, especially how the bass is on this track. And once again, Klinghoffer impresses me with this really fantastic guitar solo, as well as the closing track, Dreams of a Samurai, where I'm not sure if this is necessarily, like, related to a death, but I think he seems to briefly note the death of Scott Weiland as he's talking about how when they found his body on a tour bus, the tabloids made a small fuss, where I guess he is particularly negatively affected and really emotionally haunted by, I guess, this death of some kind. The instrumental is actually one of the most progressive songs they've ever written, and quite arguably one of their best they've written in a while. It's a 6-minute climactic track, and I dig it quite a bit. The thing with this album is it's not completely fantastic. It's not on the level of greatness that I know RHCP is capable of, but it's still particularly good. They pretty much do what I'm pretty sure RHCP fans need to keep hoping RHCP keep doing. Do different things that make each album have its own sense of identity. And with the help of Danger Mouse on production, they achieve that within leaps and bounds. I entered this album, and I'm not even gonna lie, with some kind of skepticism towards Danger Mouse being producer and Flea having his injury, and Klinghoffer still being guitarist, even though I've admired Klinghoffer as a songwriter and a performer on I'm With You Already. But still, I'm pleasantly pleased with how the performances and the experiments that this album goes for went. So much so that I really do plan on returning to this album quite a bit. Not just because I'm a big RHCP fan, but also because this is just a particularly good and particularly interesting record. This album is a plus 2.1 out of plus 3. I definitely like this one. I can't see anyone that's not already an RHCP fan like even giving this the time of day. But regardless, this is still a good album and definitely going to be maybe a favorite of mine for this month. But have you given this album a listen? What did you think of it? Did you like this album? Did you dislike this album? What was your reasoning for that, and what should I consider listening to and reviewing next? CWD Music Reviews here, signing off.